What's up, y'all? Welcome to the ProtoArt. In this video, I'm going to be covering Diffusionbee and the brand new update of version 2.5.0. So let's dive into this. So I'm going to approach this as though it's a brand new app, because it pretty much is from the ground up here. The UI is pretty much the same. Color is a little darker, but you'll also notice now we have another option here. In addition to the text to image, image to image, AI, Canvas, Inpainting, Upscale, and Training, now we have Illusion Generator. You've seen these before, these kind of patterns before. So you've seen advertisements with like Starbucks and Nike and a variety of things. People made these really cool images. So essentially you pick a pattern and it's kind of like an image to image kind of deal, where you put in your prompt, and then with that pattern, it'll generate the image with that pattern in it. Of course, my examples aren't amazing, but they should get the point across. But yeah, that one's really cool, and I can't wait to play around with that, especially with making like custom QR codes and, you know, fun promotional stuff. Great way to utilize that tool. One of the biggest updates that just dropped with this version is now you can import Loras independently. You don't need to merge them. You can, but you don't need to. Under models, you go to import from computer, locate where you have the files, select it, import it like you would anything else, and then it's good to go. These can be utilized in a few different ways. Under text to image, image to image, illusion gen, you can select the Loras independently. And under AI, Canvas, and Inpainting, you can select your models as a LoRa. So any model can be selected as though it's a LoRa. This all might be subject to change with future releases. I don't know. I didn't make the app. I just love using this thing. But let's dive into text to image. Under text to image, it looks relatively the same. Now you see the aspect ratio is an option of square, landscape, portrait, and widescreen. So you can just select these like kind of generic settings if you want to. Or you can choose the advanced options and choose your own resolution that you want. I tend to like using that one myself more than the kind of default settings there, but they've also increased the resolution. So now it's bumped up quite a bit to 1024 by 1024, which is amazing. In addition to that, still, like I mentioned in the previous video, you can use the styles now. There's a whole bunch of styles. I love this little preview window in case you forget what they look like. You can kind of see what the style will look like when you're generating an image. I don't know how much influence and weighting it has in your prompt. From my toying around with this, it seems like the less complex of a prompt I was using, the more I saw that effect. And like the more complex prompt, it didn't seem like it had as much effect. I don't know, that may have just been a weird batch of images I made. I can't say, you'll have to experiment. But besides that, under the diffusion options, pretty much the same. Same samplers, same way to use the guidance scale, same deal with the seed number. Now you have this little compatibility mode you can toggle on and off. And as it says here, if selected, it'll behave similar to other tools like Automatic 1111. Under control net, again, pretty much the same. So you have the depth, body pose, scribble, line art, and tile options. And I've covered those in previous videos and how they function. And now you have the option for LoRa. So again, under the text to image, image to image, and illusion gen, you can select your Loras independently, so you don't need to merge them down. So for the examples in the following images, I'll show you the actual Loras that I imported from Civet AI. These aren't mine. I just liked how they looked, and maybe you can use them. So one of the Loras I found on Civet AI that I really liked was different hairstyle collections. So they had like long hair, they had dreads, and just kind of a variety of styles that you can utilize in your own prompt. So just keep in mind when you do download the Loras, for one, they're smaller files, so that's wonderful. But some have particular trigger words that they need in order for them to function. So just like how you had your models before with trigger words, if you trained your own models, yeah, same thing with the Loras. So you'll need, some of them need a trigger word. So just keep that in mind when you're making your prompt. So back in Diffusionbee, if you don't see your LoRa tab by default, you just have to toggle the advanced options. And that particular LoRa example that I had requires a trigger word, so I put that in there, the Dread Hairstyle by Yoji Shinkawa, because I love the traditional art look, so it gave me that kind of look anyway. So you select your LoRa by going to the LoRa drop-down menu and click and locate your LoRa selected, and it's ready to use. And just like in my previous video, you'll have to play around with the weighting and how much you want that to influence in the overall image. So it doesn't show you in this window by default how much weighting was used in these generated images, which I hope will change in future releases. But if you go under your history tab, you can see the seed numbers and the steps used and the model used and all the other stuff. Now you'll notice it has that additional option of the style that was used in addition to the LoRa. So it shows the LoRa that was utilized and how much of that was utilized. So that was at 1, which is at the default setting. So you would move your slider over and kind of play around with how much of that is influenced in the image. And just to kind of show you how the LoRa itself can really influence the overall like style of the image, I just switched from the dreadlocks to the Afro LoRa that they had. And then it shows the high top fade style, and they call this Princess Leia, but when you download it, it's just labeled as side bun hairstyle. So this is like the Princess Leia hairstyle with Wonder Woman. But you can really get some variety of like styles just choosing the particular LoRa. And again, previously you had to merge this down, so if your model turned out looking kind of funny, you'd have to re-merge it, but now you don't have to. And again, like I'll have this model available for y'all. I'm aiming for like maybe a week from now if I'm not too busy. And I made some other interesting ones, and these are all going to be exclusive to Diffusionbee. They're the specific format for this platform, so use them as you will. Now, on top of just being able to add one LoRa style influence, you can actually pair them up and layer them up. For instance, the ones I showed you were the hair ones, but you can also add different ones like detail LoRa, comic book like influence ones by like Jim Lee, and each one of those LoRa in the description, I would urge you to read that thoroughly because they have recommendations like only use this LoRa at 0.5% or something. Like they all kind of have their different amounts that work best. So I would kind of really read through that first before you just start, throwing LoRas on everything because some will overpower it. And so there's only 3 slots for LoRas currently. So I don't know if that's a limitation to the platform or what have you, but currently you only have 3 slots, but I feel like that's plenty to kind of get whatever you're trying to accomplish done for the most part. Just keep that in mind too, playing around with the sliders and the weighting of your LoRas. So in image to image, I wanted to also kind of show you like with the overweighting of an image, you can cause more damage than good. So this was with the same hair LoRa. Having the slider too far one way or the other can, like too much of the influence can make it look kind of wild. So I was dialing it back and started looking a little bit more natural. But yeah, that's how I kind of got to this Goku here. I had my dark glow style, and the image itself wasn't bad. It's just pretty low resolution, and it's kind of lacking some details in the face and like texture and stuff. So throwing it into image to image, and then I used the control net, which I've covered before, like the different ones and how they function. And I used the tile mode, which basically just adds more detail to the image without necessarily changing a lot of things around. So like line art and scribble and body pose and depth, those all can kind of like change little details in the image itself. I didn't want that. I just wanted to increase the overall look. So doing that, again, it brought it from looking like this to looking like this image here. So increasing the resolution, I think I used the DDIM sampler, and then my resolution I set to 40, which is a pretty good start. Or sorry, the sampling steps I had set to 40, and then the resolution I had, I think I had set this to the max size there to give me this here. So again, which was the 1024 by 1024. So once I had that set in place, I started applying LoRas again. So again, you can have those if you scroll down and toggle your LoRa, and there's different ones you can add. You can see like in the hair, I'm getting a little bit more detail there, in the clothing especially. It's starting to get more detail here, like a lot more line work happening. Little scars and stuff in the arm, a little bit more prominent there. And again, this is playing around with the LoRa weighting. And then again, I think I added additional, I send this to the, what I'm doing is clicking actions and then send to image with parameters so I can see what I actually used. So that was out the box. This was with the detail LoRa added to it. This was with the detail LoRa and the little concept art LoRa. And that really made a lot more detail pop. You can just see all kinds of more detail happening in this clothing versus it looking pretty flat there. There's a lot more of this like little glowy flame energy kind of aura thing happening here. And that was not in this previous image. And it's also starting to add some detail to his eyes. So we're starting to see like pupils and stuff, and his nose and mouth are kind of taking more shape. And the next one, I started really cranking up the detail LoRa. And I actually added a Jim Lee LoRa just to see what that looks like. And that added some more dark contrasting kind of lines. It gave me more of like the comic book feel, which I really loved. And I think it looks fantastic. But I was like, all right, let me just push this a little further. So I kept going with it. So this one, I changed up my LoRa. I added 2 of my own custom ones to it. So I had my Kim Jung-gi LoRa, which is available on Civet AI, and another one I haven't released just yet. And they kind of have similar styles. And again, I don't have like a lot, the percentage-wise, happening with these. They're pretty low. But yeah, kind of just cranked it up to the pretty far in the last one here. And I thought it looked pretty awesome. So again, the beginning Goku and the Goku with all the LoRa influence of the added detail, the concept art, the Jim Lee influence, like there's a whole bunch of things going on here. We really can like make things pop. And then if you wanted to, you could use the different LoRa, like I said, with the hairstyle and give Goku an afro if you wanted to. And play around with different prompting and how that would influence your images. Moving right along. So in the AI canvas, it looks pretty much the same, but you'll have the option to select LoRa. But unlike the other image-to-image window with AI canvas, as I mentioned before, it allows you to choose other models as though they're LoRa and use them like they're LoRa. So I don't know if this is all subject to change for the next release or whatever, but yeah, as it stands, that's what you got there. So you can use like the Juggernaut XL model as a LoRa and play around with the slider on here. And yeah, that's gonna really change how much you can mix and blend. So if you have like hyper realistic stuff and like, you know, cyberpunk stuff or whatever, you can blend the two together and kind of make these models really work for you and you know, your needs. Yeah, I'll play around with that a little further. I haven't dived too deep into this one just yet, but that's going to be fun being able to play with these different models because, you know, Juggernaut XL and just a litany of models that I have will make some interesting combinations. AI canvas, again, pretty much the same. You have your box you can move around. Within that box is what you would generate. So you can expand the box, shrink it down. As it says, you have your move canvas, will move the whole canvas around here. You have your draw inpainting mask, which is wherever you're painting. You can either have that paint, if you toggle this, only update mask. So because I have this selected or painted in there, and then I have the only update mask selected, so when I press generate, it's going to generate whatever I have prompted here. Anyway, it's pretty exciting that you're able to kind of layer up your LoRas in here as well and really manipulate that. So again, I kind of covered the illusion generator. Inpainting looks relatively the same as previously, but now you have the option again for adding LoRa. And once more for this one, you can choose a model as a LoRa, not just the LoRa itself. So that might change the next release. We'll see. Oh, in addition to that, now you have the style option too to influence your inpainting. So that's pretty cool. So you can really narrow down what you're trying to do. Then we have the upscaler, which I've covered in previous videos a while ago, but basically just drag and drop an image into it. And there's only the one option to choose for the upscaler currently. And it will do what it says it does. It makes your image larger. So this was the before, and you can tell it looks a little pixelated, not as clean or not as clear and crisp. And then in Diffusionbee, the lines look a little smoothed out there and it's a little bit more crisp. I personally like running it through external apps, either like CodeFormer to fix the face a bit. Although because this is like super, you know, cartoony anime, it's not really going to do too much of a job of fixing the face, but it can sometimes fix a wonky looking face, or using like Topaz Gigapixel to fix the face a little bit there. And sometimes it does a really good job, but for the time being, this is still a pretty good option to upscale your image and tweak it a bit. Settings are the same as before. You can toggle having the noise on or off when generating an image. I usually have it off. LoRa tools are pretty straightforward. Again, I covered that before, but if you want to train your model, you need to have the base model, which currently you can only choose the Stable Diffusion model, and it says the size here too. So has to be a safe tensor between 2 to 5 gigs. Then you can choose the LoRa, which is between 20 megabytes to 300 megabytes in size. And then this is where you would choose the LoRa ratio. So that weight is from 0 to 1. So if I go back to the image to image here, so playing around with the slider, essentially you're like saying how much of this weight do you want to have baked into that LoRa or that model that you're going to make there. So you would choose the weight that you want, and then the output directory you want and what you want to call it. And then it would make a brand new safe tensor file from the merged base model and the LoRa. Interpolate is pretty much the same, with the exception of, having these updated samplers since this thing first came out. Steps are pretty much the same, up to 75. Resolution hasn't increased though, so this is still 768, which was like the max for the text image before, until that increased. Yeah, there hasn't been like a major overhaul on this, so I'm hoping something comes to this in the future releases as well. And then again, training the models, this varies depending on your computer's speed. So I'm running an old, well, now it's really old, in technology. I'm running a Mac M1, and it's only like 8 gigs of RAM or something. So this thing takes forever to train a model. So if I do want to make one, I pretty much just have to set it overnight and let it go. But if you're running like, M2 with much more RAM, it can be done within like an hour or two. Really just depends on your data set size, and I kind of covered all this too before. If you haven't seen that, check out the previous videos on how to go about getting your model ready for training and all that jazz. But you can adjust the training iterations. Essentially, in a nutshell, it's however many images and times 100. So for instance, if I had for this example, let's say this was 15 images, then that would be correct there. I'd have the 1,500 iterations. If I had 8 images or something, then it would be 800 iterations, right? So it's just, you're adding 2 zeros basically. The model size will definitely influence how long it takes for it to go. So also keep that in mind. I've tried a variety of these so far, and honestly, just the default settings look pretty good. I don't know, like you can get away with some really, really cool looking models, like the dark glow style one with the Goku. I think I did that with the 8, like pretty much all default settings. So as it recommends, training your model on your own images. You can train it on a person, you can train it on an object, you can train it on a style. Just keep in mind, when you're training for a style, it's usually recommended to have more images. When you're training it on a person, you can get away with like 15 images, but I found like a data set of like, honestly, probably closer to 30. It's gonna look a lot more accurate to the person. But the cool thing about that is you can also choose what base model you want. Now, I haven't tried training anything using the Juggernaut XL base model. I just usually stuck to the default Stable Diffusion, but you can choose that as your base model, train your data set, and that's going to heavily influence how your model is going to look. Then if you wanted to, you could bring it into the LoRa tools and then take your model that you just trained and merge it with another LoRa, so it's all baked in together. So you can just keep merging all kinds of stuff together, and it's just, you can go kind of crazy. But these are like the biggest changes with the LoRa and the recent release of being able to, utilize weighting and stuff now. So you can use pretty much any prompt that you see in the other platforms out there, like Automatic 1111, and use that in Diffusionbee. So again, I'll have some of these models available for you guys. These are all going to be exclusive to Diffusionbee. So while the last little generation's going, I kind of wanted to show you how just changing the LoRa itself will heavily influence the actual image. Like, I changed nothing with settings, I changed nothing with the guidance scale, the size, any of that stuff. Like, I literally just changed the LoRa for each one of these things. So I had a custom side model thing that I just made. Is like a kind of a remaster of an old model I made. I just retrained it in Diffusionbee, which took forever. But yeah, so this was like out the box. And then this was with the Jim Lee influence. Everything was default. So by default, it was set to 1. So this is with the Jim Lee. This is with the concept art one that you can get on Civet AI as well, which I really liked how this third one turned out. Like, it kind of, I guess, got the little glowy bit, but it really made it look really fun. And like, you know, you can always send this to like image to image or whatever and tweak it out a bit more too. And then I started merging them with some like just different styles. I had like watercolor looking stuff. I had, you know, the more detail. You can see how it like added texture to the hair. So that more detail and the add detail one tend to do that a lot to like fabrics and hair. They add like this really nice texture to your stuff. And then this was a thick line LoRa that you can find on Civet AI. It just kind of gave it more of that cartoony look, which I really loved. Especially the third one looks really cool there. And then these were with like the hairstyle ones. So this was with the afro set to 1. And, you know, again, I changed nothing but the LoRa, and it's just drastically, you know, different images we got going on here. Other LoRas that I haven't put out yet, but kind of can see the influence in that style. Has this like really interesting little abstract kind of look to it. With that being said, I think I'm going to wrap up this video here. So be sure to like, subscribe, so you never miss out on a new video. And if you haven't already, check out Diffusionbee and join that Discord, because there's a lot of useful tips and tricks. And most of the questions you probably have been asked 1,000 times over and answered there, especially the FAQ section of that Discord answers a ton of questions. So, all right, y'all, I will talk to you later, and have a good one. Peace.